Welcome to Bus Stops. We're going to talk about another picture taken at a bus stop in the GRTC system in Richmond, Virginia. And the photo that we are going to talk about is this one. Oh, buddy. Oh, buddy. I'm excited to talk about this picture. Let me tell you about this building above the horizon. This actually might be a short episode because I might just keep making noises like that again and need to stop. But this photo is the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, Virginia, and it is one of my this building. I like the building is interchangeable with the photo itself at this point because that's how much I love this building. It's like all I can look at. The Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, Virginia, and it is one of the, I think, finest pieces of architecture in Richmond. It was designed by Minoru Yamasaki, a architect of the mid-century. The international style, I believe, is the school of architecture that this building resides within. And if it looks slightly familiar, even just notionally to your eye, it is maybe because Minoru Yamasaki is also the architect of the World Trade Center towers formerly in New York City, destroyed on September 11th. And this building has many of the same visual characteristics. Actually, most of his work sits within that, international style, very kind of a subset of modernism. And so you think modernism, you think like material for material's sake, concrete and glass and steel and all these kind of large industrial scale materials. And much of architectural modernism sits within that examination of like what are the characteristics that can be brought forth out of material that other materials can't do. And so in this case, steel and aluminum and glass, can be formed into these just perfectly dead straight, almost hypnotizing parallel lines, which just stretch up from the ground. And I think the World Trade Center towers were kind of the elegant and preeminent example of that. And so architectural modernism, Minoru Yamasaki International School, the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. I love this building. And just to speak on a personal level, I think, I was not quite 7 years old when 9/11 happened. Not quite 7. And so I always understood that event from the eyes of like a child. And I don't know that it was formative in how I like thought about the world visually, but I think maybe to whatever extent those images of seeing those buildings on that day and the horrible disaster and tragedy that occurred, I don't remember like being obsessed with it when I was a kid, but to whatever extent those sort of seeped into my subconscious, I think down the line that sort of permeated my outlook on the world to some extent. And when I was in college, I made a lot of work looking at this building. And I just think it's visually striking, absolutely. But I don't know that I may have. I don't actually remember when I found out that it was the same architect. I don't know if I sensed it on sort of a notional scale and then found out the fact and was like, oh yeah, that fits. Insofar as it is like a totally just visible example of the same style, the same architect in my city as this event that I processed so visually for so many years. Because like, again, the point I was trying to make is that even if it wasn't seared with those images permanently as a child, like it was just an event, a tragedy that captured so much of my, I was, as I got older into like middle school and high school, I just like desperately wanted to understand why that happened. And just the grim fact of the poignancy of the images of those buildings and the Pentagon and everything it was horrible to see, but it had a lot of visual weight to it and everything. And you think about just these perfect, quote unquote, perfect vertical lines that stretch into the sky. And the disruption of those lines through an act of terrorism is visually impactful, to put it kind of sterilely. And so I think that, as a photographer, I process the world in one way, and like I don't just process things through photographs, but nonetheless, like the horribleness of that day is nonetheless you look at pictures that's of any historical event, especially one that's so photographed as that. Pictures bring it home, and that's just part of the I guess I tried to kind of say earlier, but like in college, I made a lot of work about this building, and sorry, bit at a loss for words. I said earlier, I guess earlier in the series, that I didn't want to just sort of make every video kind of a discursive on my own life and my own history and whatever, but I find it hard not to talk about that to some extent with this picture, because it does, not this exact picture, not that it means a lot to me, but it does sort of bring to the surface a lot of the things that I made artwork about in college and all that. But like insofar as just even the fact of like vertically stretching upward lines were part of like the main visual thrust of the Twin Towers, and then it's so visible here. A lot of the pictures that I've taken of the Federal Reserve, they're sort of most effective, and I think it's present in this photograph too, where you lose a sense of the scale of the building. Of course, it's easy to see in this one here. You have lights, you can see some of the fluorescent tubes and everything, and like you can see the edge of the building here and sort of the relative scale of that fence and everything, and so you don't lose the scale completely. You see another building behind it where you can see the nameplate on the building, and you see some of the furniture and everything. So you don't like lose the scale absolutely of the building, but nonetheless, these pictures have always been most impactful when like the top of the building is cut off, and it has that effect which stretches up almost unendingly in your mind. Like there is just absolutely no suggestion that this building ever comes to an end. And so I not only found that poignant as I considered its relevance to the tower is also designed by this architect, but also the subject matter itself. This building is one of the 12, I think there are 12 Federal Reserve banks in the United States. The purpose of the Federal Reserve is to ensure, basically to pull the levers of monetary policy in order to keep our currency stable, that there's not rapid inflation or deflation. They print the money bluntly, maybe not at this precise bank, but they decide how much money is printed. It's just kind of, oh gosh, there was a book one time I read that was joking of like, it was like such and such character has as much passing interest in economics as any other adult male or something like that. And maybe it was a video, or I can't remember, but I found that hilarious because I have a passing interest in economics. Monetary policy is an interesting idea. And in college, in 2016, 2017 is when I was making a lot of work that was centered upon this building, or use it as a visual metaphor. At that time in the US, it wasn't all sunshine and roses, but it was at least pre-COVID. And I think the kind of national sentiment was generally more positive than it is now, to be as, again, sterile as possible. I always sort of found this picture, not this picture, but like any picture that I made involving this building to like contain no small amount of dread, both in sort of the proximity, the visual proximity and similarity to those towers, which are hard to view anymore without thinking of their tragic end, the loss of lives of so many people. But yeah, just the overbearingness of the verticality of the thing itself. And the suggestion of unendingness, I think, is humbling in and of itself. And so this is a human creation. It's not a naturally unending thing, but it's kind of, when you think about how much of your life is affected by how much your money is worth. Like as I got older, I stopped making a lot of work like this, because like when you're a young 20-something or a teenager, like it's I guess there's the arrogance of standing in front of the face with something like this and just thinking that your own life is limitless, your own ability to survive and overcome and persevere has no end. But as I've gotten older, I realize sort of the fragility and the impermanent nature of life, and it's not as fun to try to to stand before work, to try to stand before seemingly unending things with such boldness and arrogance. And so, even in this picture, I think one of my favorite pictures I ever made in college is a very similar composition to this, and yet it was like made across the street, or same side of the street here, but it was like made from a higher perspective, from like a parking deck. And so the cars are much smaller. This intersection here of Bird and Bird Street, and then 9th Street. Yeah, 9th Street. This intersection was small. And like the building still was cropped at the top, and so it had that sort of unending quality to it, but it was much more of like a broad and overview. And it's kind of funny looking at this picture, because I'm basically almost on the ground before this building. You see the cars there are like the camera is almost at eye level, so to speak, with like the rim, the middle of the wheels of the car. So it's just a few inches or feet off the ground, and so it's almost like a prostrated or a kneeling view before this. I think I was like literally bent over at the hip and holding my camera facing up. But yeah, the viewpoint of this is far more humble before this seemingly infinite thing, and so that's. Again, I wasn't thinking of any of this when I made the picture. I just sort of like was excited that there was a bus stop here and I could make this particular image of this particular building within this series. But it is sort of funny to trace the visual depiction of this particular building from when I was in college to now, where it's kind of below the cars and the cars sort of pass back and forth before it. Visually, I think the cars begin to compete with this building. I think this picture has been edited. I don't want to verify that right now, but I think I've already edited this picture for its values and everything, and obviously ensuring that the lines are perfectly straight and perfectly parallel with the edges of the frame. I wanted the sky and the building to sort of have this suggestion of infinity, and so I think I darkened everything sort of below that, the light poles right there, and so this has those dark streaks, and obviously the cars are blurred, so like the motion of life sort of continues on and rushes by you. But there's this like the dragging and the streaks and everything, and the relative unsharpness of the foreground is sort of obviously contrasting with the tack sharpness and the brightness and even the contrast of, there's still a lot of contrast in this image where the windows sort of form these dark voids against the steel and it's probably aluminum, but the cladding of the building itself. And so we got pretty morose, reflective, in this episode. But nonetheless, I am but a human being, and so yeah, it's important to feel these things sometimes and to process it. And it's just a bit strange to do it in front of a microphone. So. Anyway, I hope you like this image. I hope you appreciated hearing about it. But yeah, I think that's about all I got to say. Thank you.